Hey, everybody, and welcome to Comics and Cinema. I'm your host, Alex Klein, and today we are diving into the wonderful world of She Hulk, or I should say, the sensational world of She Hulk, both via a little bit of discussion around this first episode, but mostly this is our comic book episode of the month. So we are going to be diving into She Hulk comics. And because this is not my area of expertise, I have brought in some absolute Avengers when it comes to knowing She Hulk lore and comics. First up, we've got Sarah. Welcome to the show.
Hello, good to be here. Good to be back.
Yes, very glad to have you. And we also have Kevin. Kevin, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me, Alex. Glad to be talking with you and Sarah.
Yeah. This is a fun one. This show, like I said, I don't have a lot of background with She-Hulk. I knew her tangentially through a lot of the comics, as being, part of supporting characters for Fantastic Four, for the Avengers, and I had read a few issues of her solo stuff. I specifically remember I'd actually had the issue of her Civil War series with Dan Slott. I think it was just one issue. But I was never a big She-Hulk fan. And Sarah, I know you are a huge one, and I've also found out that Kevin is also a huge one. So super happy to have you guys here. Before we dive in, what I'm thinking we'll do is kind of go through. I wanted to go through the line because you guys both recommended some really great runs that I got to read, and kind of seeing how they tie into this episode so far, and maybe any through lines or threads that we can guess as to what's coming in this season. But Sarah, I'll start with you. I would love to hear, how was this first episode of She-Hulk for you?
So I just watched it again this morning. I'm a fan. I mean, I've been a Jen Walters fan for a long time. But it's exciting. Like I think it set up a good it kicked things off really well. And I see things from different comic runs that make me excited about like where this is going next, especially the Titania stuff. Like I want to know where that's going.
Yeah. Kevin, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. We discussed this more in depth last night on Earth's Mightiest Weirdos, and I was on that episode as well. So I'll keep my thoughts again brief this time, but go back and listen to that episode as well. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Brian, our amazing producer and Earth's Mightiest Weirdos host, had mentioned like what did you think of the premieres? And to me, this series has been my most anticipated for Disney Plus, but I think Miss Marvel's premiere and maybe Moon Knight's did beat it as like just a premiere episode. But like Sarah, I enjoy the by the end of it, I was like, okay, I'm ready for episode 2, episode 3, I'm ready for more episodes now, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, I enjoyed it. That's not saying I didn't enjoy it in any way, but I think Miss Marvel had a better one, like right off the jump, especially for me, because as I said last night, I wasn't as excited for Miss Marvel. And when I came into it, I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. It's much better than I thought it was going to be. And She-Hulk was my favorite one. So I wouldn't say I was disappointed. I was like, oh, this is a good anchor. I'm ready to move on. Let's see what episode 2 brings.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Go ahead, Sarah.
I just want to reaffirm that this was not a bad premiere. It's just that they're setting the bar higher and higher.
Right.
And so it's just, where it stacks up against all the others.
Yeah. And I had mentioned too last night, and Sarah, I don't know if this applied to you as well. Being somebody now who I've grown to really love this character, and I know a lot of her comic stuff, I came in, I knew a lot about her, and obviously, as we discussed last night, the origin stuff was supposed to be in episode 8 of the series, and they moved it up to episode 1. So now people who obviously didn't know She-Hulk obviously are getting like they're being introduced to her and whatever. So for me, I was like, okay, I know most of these beats. I know who this character is. I know about the fourth wall stuff, like all that. So like that wasn't a shock to me. And Sarah, I don't know if to you, but Alex, being somebody who knew a little bit, but maybe not as much as either of us. Like if you felt differently about that, you know?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed this premiere. I liked it more a second time. The first time I watched it,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, that was good. Like, awesome. Move on to the next thing. But then I was like, ooh, like, what if I watched it again? I kept thinking back to some of the jokes, and I was like, how do they hit a second time? And I was laughing just as much as I was the second time. Like, the writing on this was absolutely fantastic. And I loved too that we got kind of like what you were just saying, Kevin. Like Marvel really likes having that second to last episode as the flashback. So I applaud them for making it the first episode, getting
Yep.
this out of the way. Like this is my dream scenario. If you get your superhero origin in 20 minutes and we're moving on, like even the way that they did it of her being like, actually, we should probably take you back and just show you it. And I was like, oh no, here comes the flashback. But it worked for me because we got to see
Yeah.
Hulk. We got to see some hints of what happened during the blip, which was great. But then, yeah, as a not a super fan from the comics, reading some of these issues, and it was funny. Like after the first episode, I can't remember if I read the Dan Slott stuff before or after the first episode, but I remember being like, ooh, like this is probably something that'll happen in the show, or oh, that's like there he is. There's the big one for me was Pug because they like quietly announced him. If you remember, Kevin, from our episode, like they had him in like a separate announcement of, oh, here's some other characters from the show. But then when I'm reading the comics, and I think it was like the first Dan Slott run or whatever, where Pug's there, and I was like, oh, no way. So he's like actually pretty prominent in this series. That's pretty cool. And then to see him in the show, I was like, oh, awesome. And then you can clearly tell that, Nikki is mirrored off of probably a couple of different characters, but just as like the, what was it? Is her name Melanie or Melody?
Mallory?
Thinking Mallory, yes.
Well, Mallory is in the show.
Yeah, she's going to show up.
That's Renee.
Oh, she is?
Yeah, that's
Oh.
Renee Ellsbury. I
Okay.
think
Goldsberry.
Nikki Goldsberry. Yeah, I think Nikki is more or less Wheezy from the Byrne run, who is she was a golden era or golden age comics character, and like Byrne and like the fourth wall stuff was, oh, Byrne brought her in here so that she didn't like get retired or like unused, or whatever. And she's essentially the paralegal best friend type person in that Byrne run. And I think because I don't if I remember in the Slott run, I don't think she really has like a paralegal type person in that one. Right. So I think Nikki is more or less like who Wheezy was in the Byrne run, like that type of figure and whatever. That's what I'm believing to be, But she is, as far as I'm aware, an original creation. Sarah, you might correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think her character of Nikki is an original for the series. I think, So
I'm not aware of. Yeah,
neither am I. Yeah, so I think so it's not like a 1-to-1, but like me knowing the history, I'm like, oh, that's Wheezy from the Byrne run. I feel like.
Nice. Yeah. And I love the fact that they, if it is, this brand new character, I love that they're putting her as like, she's the positive best friend. Like, I really like that. I love that. Even the one character, Pug, is kind of like, he's a jerk, but it's by design and it's like sitcom-esque. So like the whole cast so far has sold me. And I saw Brian in the comments said that the Titania fight was brutal. I agree. I think that end bit was very sudden. And I felt like, oh, could I have just getting like, two more, like what was she even doing? Why is she busting through this door? And of course, like She-Hulk stops her in one punch. Like, okay, that's great, but I need a little more. But I think that's a good thing, right? Like now I'm antsy to see what happens in the second episode. A couple of things I want to call out on this was there's a mention Bruce mentions when they're in the cave, but in his lab, and he says he destroys all of the DNA and says if there's even 1/1,000,000th of a chance that this DNA is going to get out, that would not be good. And I was like, oop, okay, so I think we know what the overarching issue of the show might be eventually is that someone's blood gets out, which would be kind of cool. And it's been a while since I realized like this is going to be like a Hulk's show in a sense. Like, I don't think Bruce will be in another episode. If he is, great, but it doesn't seem like it. But there's a lot of stuff here where I'm like, I feel like we're going to get a lot of Hulk characters from the other Hulk series as well, like comic stuff of whether that's, we're getting Abomination. And then, what happens with this blood issue? Like, who's going to, is they going to turn to the Red Hulk? Is there going to be what they got? Like A-Bomb, I think is one of them. There's like a whole litany of Hulks that they can go through.
Amadeus Cho.
Yes, yeah. Oh man, that would be awesome. That would be totally awesome,
It
actually.
would.
But yeah, so that part I really liked, and then also, and I mentioned this in our little chat, and I just have to say it because my brother texted me today, and he was like, "Hey, have you seen this new She-Hulk show? I heard it." He goes, "I looked on IMDb and it's getting abysmal reviews," and I was like, "Okay," and I just grabbed my phone and just started typing. I was trying to explain to him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, all of that makes sense." I'm like, "Yeah, but." The show's getting review bombed, and I told you
Yeah.
guys this a week or two ago. I was just on there, and I accidentally started looking at the reviews, and they were just it like I don't even know how a logical person could read these and be like, "Oh, this is actually like authoritative and a good wealth of knowledge." Like one of them said, something about like why do they keep giving women shows? Go watch Iron Man, and I was like to me, that's just insane. Like we've got so much. Someone else said nothing's been the same since after Avengers Endgame, and I'm like, oh, so you mean you just don't like diversity? Like you can just say that instead, since that's
Yeah.
basically what they did. It blows me away, and the show's not even out yet. And I was telling my brother that yeah, the review bombing is a joke in my opinion because we're all gonna go watch the show anyway. Like I don't care what the reviews say. I'm gonna go figure it out for myself. But I said for like a general audience member like him, look what he did. Like he's like, oh, I heard the show's bad. I heard it got bad reviews, and I'm like, no, it just got review bombed. So
Yeah.
I guess to some people it's still working. But did you guys experience any of that or see any of that? I hope not.
I put my head in the sand. I really, you and I have talked about this, Alex, but all of the super heavy marketing, um, and all the clips that come out, and I don't want to know anything. I don't want to see
Right.
anything. Give me one trailer, I'm good. Like I don't need anything else, and I don't want to have any preconceived ideas of if I'm gonna like it or if I'm not gonna like it. I just want to go in carte blanche.
Yeah.
Well, luckily for you, Sarah, this trailer for the series was basically episode 1, so
Yeah,
you're
Yes,
like
it
yeah,
was.
you're good.
And
But yet, I mean, I saw that it got review bombed, but that's like, I mean, I don't know why anybody ever takes any stock in user reviews. I mean, there's already enough, what is it, hesitation with people doing like critics reviews on like Rotten Tomatoes. Like, there's already enough hesitation there and whatnot. So it's like, why even bother like going with like if you see the user reviews, like I don't know how. I mean, I'm not somebody who frequents like IMDb or has lists or anything on IMDb, so like I'm never like I don't want to know what any other person is saying. That's like so, sure I might look at like what the trades are saying, like Hollywood Reporter, Variety, like what they say, but like at the end of the day, like Sarah said, I'm still gonna make my own opinion. Like I'm
right.
just, but I'm
yep.
just curious. Usually at that point, I'm just curious to see like what's the feel like, what are people feel like the critics feeling about it, and then it's like, oh, are they all like feeling something about this way, are they all different or whatever, just so I know like how people are perceiving it, and then I make my own opinion on it.
Yeah, honestly that's probably my downfall. Is I love IMDb. I just yesterday I rated all of the MCU show episodes because like you can rate the show as a whole. That's what they all are. But if you
Mhm.
click in the episodes, you can actually rate each episode. And I was like, actually, I think I need to do that because I've always been struggling with like what's my favorite episode, or if I'm giving a too high of a ranking based on the episodes themselves. I get really into the weeds with that stuff. So that's probably why I spend maybe a little bit too much time on IMDb. Brian says that's party time, and you know what? It is a party when you're looking at movies on IMDb. But let's start out comics wise. I think this one, Sarah. I'd love to hear your thoughts too on this. I know Kevin was saying not a huge fan. I was not either of the kind of initial the Savage She-Hulk run,
Yeah,
this
Yeah.
first run. I think I maybe read the first 2 issues and I was
Yeah.
already like, okay, this is like kind of
yep.
slow. And okay, and that's good. So we won't talk about it too much, but I want to talk about it in reference to the show for the origin
Yeah.
of man, I'm blanking on her
Jen.
name. Jen.
Jen
I was
Walters.
thinking Betty, but that's a different one.
Eddie Ross.
So
Yeah, no.
in the comic, she's shot by gangsters, very similar to Punisher's wife. Is how I saw that the same way. And so she needs a blood transfusion, but the only person that can give it to her is Bruce. And with she has no say in the matter. He knows that he's giving her his tainted blood and does so without her permission. Very questionable in this day. I mean, it should have been questionable back then too. Of like, oh, you should ask for their permission first. So very different in the show. She cuts her hand on the side of a car. He also gets cut and the blood goes into her. I did not see anything from the trailers on that too. So I really liked that compared to the old way of doing it. I think it made a lot more sense, and it makes it less of like an issue with Bruce, I think, because I don't know if that ever carried over into any of the other issues, but I feel like I would have been upset with my cousin if he'd have done that to me. Like, yeah, I guess I'm get to be a Hulk now. That's kind of fun, but like you did this without my permission. Like there's going to be this awkward thing between them, but now it's like this was a complete accident, and neither of them had any fault in it. So it's like we can just move away from it, sort of thing, which I kind of like. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of missed that element. I don't know. It felt too. It felt a little clunky. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but I don't know. I like the way that it happens in whether it's the car crash or getting shot, whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know. Kevin, what do you think?
I mean, well, I think what you said, Alex, was something I seen. I saw Jessica Gao, the showrunner, said like essentially about Bruce that like taking away, like having it be more accidental. Like obviously, like
Right.
during the crash, like she gets cut like by accident, and then his device is injured, and so he starts bleeding, and he can't change, you know, and like it's not like he's choosing to like give it against her will, you know, obviously knowing the repercussions, it just happens. So it's like, yeah, I mean, in the show, it's like I sort of liked that it happens, it's done, she transformed, we're past it, you know, it's like we got it, it was done, you know. So I liked it, and I mean, I thought it was a good. Obviously, yeah, like you said, like it took less of the, like Bruce still feels guilty about it, but he knew it was an accident, and like, okay, so now we're gonna try and move forward. Can't really cure it, but like we'll help you manage it. And then he's like, oh, you can control this. Okay, great. And then, you know, so we're past it, you know. So I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, that makes sense. It moves the plot forward quickly. I mean,
but it also gives a pretty big like question mark too, because you're like, what is going on with this spaceship? And like, okay, of course it showed up out of nowhere and she just swerves out of the road, and I'm like, wow, what a meet cute. But at the same time, I think when it comes to origins, I think that's something Marvel's maybe realizing, and I'm hopeful, because it seems like it's different every time, but it's very brisk every time too when it needs to be. And so I feel like for like She-Hulk, her origin doesn't matter. Like how she got her powers doesn't matter, because we already saw it with Bruce, right? Like we saw the whole Hulk situation. And so to have that great comparison of like, here's all the struggles that Bruce had, she doesn't have any of that. So we get to move past all of that. It's almost essentially like if we'd have gotten the second series of Spider-Man movies and there hadn't been a whole Uncle Ben scene. Like it would have been great. The movie would have been a lot more brisk, and that's kind of what they're doing here, which also plays really well with a sitcom type show, or with a, you know, what is it? A lawyer comedy, I think is what, or a law comedy.
Half-hour legal drama.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's really cool. The next one, though, I think is this was an interesting one. I was not expecting to like this one as much, just because the older the comics, there's a lot of runs where it's like, you know, they're kind of just middle of the road. I usually will fall asleep if I'm reading them at night because nothing really happens. And John Byrne's She-Hulk run was really good. I was really impressed with it. And the episodes are the issues that you recommended, Kevin. I think it was like 10 of them or something like that from maybe the middle of the run. But it was awesome, and I loved it. Sarah, I see you're shaking your head. Is it because I didn't read enough of them?
No. It's such a good.
Oh, okay.
It's just iconic. Like there's.
Yeah. I read something too, and I mean, we'd kind of known it already of people, and I think Brian mentioned it on the show last night too, around, you know, Deadpool breaking the fourth wall. Jen Walters already did it. I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about this, because that was one of the big things that I was thinking about while I was reading these, is she broke the fourth wall. It feels like, at least from what I've read Deadpool wise, way better than Deadpool did, because his whole thing is like he's got multiple voices in his head and he knows he's in a comic book, but very rarely does he actually talk about the book that he's in. It's usually about like the world in general, right? Like he'll, you know, I don't know, fidget spinners, or, you know, like, oh, what are you guys doing? He never is referencing that he's in a comic book. He just knows that he's in one. Whereas hers, it felt like, was constantly like, personally talking to John
Yes.
Byrne, and I'm just like thinking in my head, what a fun time that must have been for him to write, to be like, oh, what would She-Hulk say to me if she did it? So I don't know. I loved it, and I loved how he played with that in the medium. There's that one issue where the cover suggests that we're going to get to see She-Hulk naked, and it never happens because of this, like, you know, the wind, and then there was always covering there anyway. You know,
wasn't
never
there
get
a
away with
rope?
Yeah, the jump
Yes,
rope.
yeah,
one.
exactly.
The jump rope one.
Kevin, what'd you think? So, what would you say in terms of the, you know, fourth wall type stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. Burns, I think, is probably my favorite run, just because I just love his art of her. Like, he draws the best She-Hulk. I think, Sarah, is your shirt the John Byrne art? Yeah, he draws the best She-Hulk, in my opinion. And yeah, well, like you said, like it still is from like the late 80s, early 90s, and like there's like weird arcs of it where they're like going to space, and there's like the it's like the hog or whatever, it's like the trucker hog or something like that. Like there's like the 18-wheeler in space and whatever, and like there's like weird parts of it too, and so it's like yeah, it still got that, but just getting that essence out of the character was really cool, and I really enjoyed it. And I know, at least when I read the Sensational She-Hulk, because Byrne didn't do the whole thing, there was like some stuff in the middle of, like, he like did it for like the first 8, then he like left, and then he came back. And I don't know if Marvel Unlimited has since updated the middle parts and the end part, because once they hit Byrne's last one, I don't think they have them on there, but I'll have to check that again, because I check periodically to see if they've updated it. But I'd love to, because I think Sarah had also sent me some comics a while ago from the She-Hulk run that weren't Byrne's, I think, because they had Spider-Man in them or something, and so those I remember were pretty good. But like the Byrne stuff is just really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Sarah, and I got a question, because you might know this too. I know you've got a vast knowledge of that sort of stuff. But like, as I was reading them, you know, we got the issue we just talked about, whereas like it feels like they were using She-Hulk to sell comics, in terms of like, oh, if we just sexualize her in all of these issues, because she looks good in these issues, and she does not look that way in a lot of the other shows. And I was like, does that feel like, though, it's like diminuting her in a sense of, I don't know, like I felt like as I was reading it, I was like, She-Hulk was amazing. Her characterization was amazing. Any interaction she had with everyone was amazing. But the stories all just were like, oh, we're going to have her fight this guy who's like anti-women. And then, oh, there's a big rig in that. Like, it was never like, oh, this, a story that stretches 20 issues, or a villain who's got this very deep seated thing. I mean, the closest I would say is maybe Titania, but it felt like the stories themselves were lacking, while as she was amazing in them. But it made me wonder, I'm like, okay, so then why were you writing this comic if it was just to probably sell these issues, or to keep her on people's minds while she's teaming up in other books? Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it does. There are some issues that it's just like the covers. I think it's 39 and 40 and 43 of the John Byrne run, where she's like almost naked on the covers. It's like some of it feels I don't want to say gratuitous, but it's like, what is the issue, or what is the point? But it's been like that for a long time. If you look at the old Fantastic Four issues, there's one in particular I'm thinking of where Stan Lee is on the cover, and there's like a pinup poster like in the middle of the comic book.
Oh, wow.
Of She-Hulk. So I don't know. It's always been that. But I will say in the more recent runs, the way that they have turned her into like like almost a feminist, like feminist hero, feminist warrior, is kind of reclaiming her character, I think. For women.
And maybe that was just, I mean, as a product of the times, I think at that time, you know, a lot of the female characters were being sexualized in that way. But it was just interesting to me that I don't think the level of care was given to a lot of the other female characters, whereas it felt like, to me, She-Hulk was given that. Again, the story wasn't great, but I was just entranced with her in these issues because I was like, what's she gonna say next? Like, when is she gonna break the fourth wall again, or like have some really cool quip that she tells somebody? It'd been a while since I'd been so interested in such an older comic, so it just made me curious because I'm like, okay, there's even the main issue, right, where she's holding she's like, you better buy this comic or I'm gonna rip up all your X-Men. And so it's like, it clearly is, and same with the nude one, right? Like, the cover makes you go, oh, I gotta buy this issue, and then literally the first thing is like, gotcha, and it's like, but you paid for the comic already, so we got your money. So it was like clearly a marketing ploy. But I think maybe society has wizened to the fact that you should not be using that as a marketing ploy in this day and age. Any other thoughts from either of you on the Byrne run?
Just, I love it. It's so good.
Yeah, it felt cozy. Well, I mean, I was reading it in bed, but there's like those Christmas issues and something about it was just like, this is just, it was nice. It felt good.
And the omnibus just came out, was it like a couple of years ago?
I think it might have been last year, because I know they released a couple of them. They did like the Peter David one, they did the Dan Slott one, they did the Byrne one, all around I think they did it. It would have had to have been last year because I think they did it to coincide with the release, but because everything got pushed back, they can't change the release schedule. So, which is interesting because in that point of reference, we just got an announcement that Monica Rambeau Photon series is coming. I think it's a mini series, but it is being written by Eve Ewing.
Yes.
And it comes out in December. And so, and we posted that. Kevin and I were talking about a little bit of like, that's probably what she's going to go by in the MCU because they're releasing it so close to the Marvels. And now they have re-released that Secret Invasion series that they canceled because now it's getting, so like, they're always trying to time these releases with these shows, but it's so unpredictable with, the scheduling and all of that. Okay. So the next run and honestly, this might've been my favorite run of the ones that I read, was the Dan Slott run. And I think what I liked so much about this run was the focus on lawyering. And I think just that idea of like, oh, this is so cool. But like I said, there's a lot of pieces in this run that I think the most pieces in this run from the show. Because you start out in the first issue where she's fighting against GKH&L just the same as she is in the show. And then you find out by the second issue that they try to get her like fired from their firm so that they can hire her and use her for superhuman stuff. And I think it was the gal that is like, she's not necessarily her paralegal, but she is on the squad and she's always trying to use Jen. Like, she's like, we need to go do this because we need She-Hulk. That sort of, I don't remember what her name was, but that kind of reminded me a bit of it. But yeah, I loved it. I loved that run. I thought it was really fun. Sarah? Please.
Yeah, no. I like that one. I think we've talked about this. I'm not a big fan of the art in that one.
Yeah.
The first slot run
is better.
The second, the first slot run I don't enjoy as much. The second one's a little bit better. But then once they get the Greg Horn covers, that's the covers that they get, because the Greg Horn covers
those are awesome.
I would say the best drawn covers of She-Hulk outside of Byrne, because
really,
I think it's just like the almost realistic style of it or whatever. I think it's got a nice touch to it. So, but yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think most of the TV series I think is pulling from Slott, or at least the elements of it. And I thought one of the biggest issue or part of it is when they do the Star Fox trial. Did you read that, Alex?
What do you remember the issues on that?
It's like 9 to 12 in the second run, I think.
Okay, I did not get to that one.
Okay, so the biggest of when Star Fox is on trial for essentially raping somebody, and Jen represents him, and it's that was like a pretty big storyline in the comics. I remember when it happened, or looking back, people were like, "Oh, that was a monumental one," or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and that's who knows. I mean, we've only seen Star Fox like briefly at the end of Eternals. Who know? I doubt, kind of like how they haven't really done anything with Hank Pym and like hitting Janet or anything. Like, would they ever go that far with him? Like, probably not. But that was I would recommend that. It's in the second Slott run towards the middle of it. I think, yeah, like I said, I think it's like issues 9. I think it starts around there, and then it kind of like that kind of like reverberates throughout that run of like the
Interesting.
ramifications of it and like why it happened and like was he being set up with his power? Like, it was essentially like, did he know, like, because his powers are the emotion manipulators or whatever it is? It's like, was he consciously doing this to the women that he was sleeping with, or was he unconsciously doing it? You know, so it was like, was he actually raping or not raping these women and stuff? You know, so it was pretty powerful stuff and like what they were tackling in this comic book.
Yeah, Sarah, it's funny. You and I had talked about that in the Eternals podcast around, oh, great, we're getting Star Fox, but how are they going to
How are
kind
they
of
gonna?
tackle
Yeah.
that? Because it's like that is technically what his power is he has, and
Yep.
of course it's Harry Styles, right?
Yeah.
Like he already has that power. So I'm glad to hear that they actually tackled that in the comics
Mhm.
because I mean, that feels like easy fruit to grab just because that's such a questionable power to have. So that's interesting. There was a guy too I think it was in one of the first few issues where he didn't want to have powers, or you remember that one where he gets his powers at work, but due to a freak accident, and he's like suing his company because
Oh yeah.
he doesn't want to be big and strong anymore.
Mhm.
And they're all like, wait, you don't want to be big and strong?
Yeah.
But I loved that because they showed, how it affected his family and how it's affecting him, and he had to like leave and all that stuff. So I just the like legal implications of superheroing, I think, is probably the most interesting concept in
Yeah.
the She-Hulk, all the She-Hulk comics. It's just like how she's able to interpret the law. There was even the bit where, well, that was like the Dan Slott thing, was that in the basement of GKH&L,
The long
they've got
boxes.
all the long boxes
Mhm.
of all of the comics in the in the Marvel universe, and they're like, yeah, these are all real comics that have been written about us, that are all they're approved by the superheroes. It's like, yes, that's what
Well,
happened.
because it was because of they had the Comic Codes Authority stamp, and that made them legal documents
Right.
when they were published. So that's why that was the argument for them being used.
Yeah, so cool. Like, what a cool concept. And then, they're getting to rifle through it. And I'm like, oh, I had that issue. I had that issue of like showing the old covers and all that was
Mhm.
just so cool. And they're showing it through there of like, oh, all these times people got their powers without their, consent and all of that. So I really hope they dive into that in the show. And I know they will, but I just can't wait to see how, because I'm sure there's going to be this overarching story, whatever that ends up being, but there's going to be like the day-to-day law things each episode. So I really hope they dive into like some, ooh, nice, we got him on a technicality or something like that. I mean, you can really see it with her saying the oh, it's implied endorsement and all this stuff. Like, she's smart, she knows what she's doing. Okay, any other thoughts or things around Dan Slott's run?
No, it's enjoyable. It's the one I would, yeah, definitely, if anybody wants a quick read of something, I would recommend reading that one to
Yeah.
start.
Yeah,
to
very
start with.
brisk.
Yeah.
Yep.
There is also the bit in there, a very casual spell by Scarlet Witch to make everyone
Yes.
forget that she's She-Hulk, basically. Or what, anyone who wishes She-Hulk harm will not know that she is She-Hulk, which was great because that was in like the third issue, and then that comes back at the very end of that first run,
Yep.
where she's able to defeat Titania because she just turns into Jennifer Walters. And I was like, okay, that's pretty nice. And speaking of Titania, let's talk about her real quick, because I think she has a pretty interesting run in Dan Slott's as well.
Yep.
We get to see a little bit of her backstory too, coming from a very broken home.
I think it is. I think it is her backstory. Like, I don't think it had been explored.
It really felt that way when I was reading. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this seems like this is like the definitive backstory, which was
Yeah.
cool because we get a bit of. I think Carl Creel was in either that one or another one where he's kind of talking about too, like how he cares about her and like, yeah, you don't know what she's been through and all this stuff, which I thought was really cool. I wonder, do you think we're going to get that in the show, or is it going to be that she's just, because they say that she's like an influencer or something like that. So are they going to go too deep into what her backstory is, or just make her like a throwaway villain?
I mean, I feel like it's Jamila Jamil. I think that they would be mistaken to not use her to the fullest. I hope that they explore that a little bit, because she's interesting, and her relationship with Jen is like, I love like the ups and downs. It's almost like Black Widow and Yelena Belova.
Right.
So I love it. I hope they milk that.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
you know they're going to, because she beat her in one hit. Like, she is
Yeah.
never gonna
Yeah.
let that be lived
No.
down. She's gonna be wanting revenge the whole time.
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I think based on what we've seen, they've released about Titania in the series, I think we'll get some of the essence of the comics character. But obviously, being a social media influencer, like that's completely new and different,
Yeah.
on the character. So I um I don't know how much they're going to actually pull from the comics history, because obviously in the comics the character was created by Doctor Doom for the Secret Wars, and like that's obviously not happening, or not yet anyways, so like that's not going to be like, that part's not going to translate over. But she obviously, in theory, we think has super strength like she does in the comics, so we have to obviously, like, how does she have super strength, so that hopefully there will be a explanation as to like why she's like that.
Yeah.
But I think we'll get some essences of the character in the series, but it might not be a more faithful adaptation as She-Hulk is or has been so far.
Yeah. Got to call out our faithful producer, Brian. Says he could be watching Top Gun, but he chose us three. Brian, thank you for tuning in. But you're clear to fly if you want to go check that movie out. What's that, your fifth time to go to watch it? But good for you. We're glad to have you here. I have a question around that too, kind of from the show's scenario of like, they're talking about, all these characters with powers are popping up, and we've got all this law that we're practicing. What is it that is it something where they're going to address it? Do you think that like there's just an influx of people that are getting powers now? You know what I mean? Like, they're making it sound like, oh, Joe Schmo just woke up the other day and he has powers now. Like, is there something that happened that we missed, or that we're going to find out that like caused, sort of like an M-Day type Terrigen bomb that went off and gave a bunch of people powers? Like, are we going to see that with Titania, that maybe she woke up one day and just had powers? Because I'd want to know kind of what's behind that. And is that tied to the Sakaar ship?
Could be.
I like that.
I don't know if it's tied to the Sakaar ship, but I mean, yeah, we have the blip, we have Wanda's thing out in Westview. Like,
Right.
we have a bunch of options of things that could have made powers, but as far as I'm aware, it just feels like it's just going to be covering people who have them, but they're just so minor that it's just like it wasn't anything that was worth covering in the MCU as legal documents would go, I guess, as like showing their stories. I don't know. But
do you think there'll be mutants? Maybe because the way
possible.
that Kamala gets her powers too is very sudden, and turns out
Yeah.
that she had a mutation. So maybe like the mutant gene is starting to wake up now that an incursion happened, or it could be from the timeline. Because I don't know, did I tell you guys this, that I have this theory that Kang, his whole bit is that he was pruning all of the timelines because he knew that if certain people became powerful or got powers or became mutants, that they would be able to stop him. So he has pruned all the timelines where a mutant comes up, or where the Fantastic Four comes up, or some other person and that's the reason we haven't seen them, is because he's been trimming it. But now that he's dead, all these people are starting to get power. Like that would be
That's
interesting.
good. That is good.
Story.
That's
Save
a
that
receipt. Yeah, that's a receipt.
Okay, all right. Yeah, hey, you guys heard it here first. We'll see if it pans out. Okay, so Peter David's run. I'm a big Peter David fan. I was not as much a fan of these issues, and Sarah. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, because I know Sarah loves.
There was just something about it, and I even read a couple of the slots before it transitioned to David's, and it not just that it kind of felt a little bit abrupt. I got why, like she was kind of on the run sort of thing, but it was like now she's kind of a bounty hunter. The concept was cool because there's the whole bit where she busts into the house. And that was what it was in, the one where she's talking about Titania. Creel snaps her neck. And I was like, oh, whoa, she's going to be She-Hulk now. And then, like, she wasn't. But then there's also a She-Hulk. So we find out that there's a Skrull. Like, that whole thing intrigued me. But then the whole of, like, oh, so she's now just a process server. Or she's a bounty hunter, essentially, or a headhunter. I was like, she could be doing better, but I get why she was doing it. So it was an interesting like trail off. I'm glad she's not doing that anymore. But talk to me, Sarah. What was it that you loved about this series?
I liked the I loved her internal journey, like her running away from who she is as a hero, and trying to like pursue this bounty hunting. Like, it's just so silly. But and I also liked the friendship. I loved her and Jacinda's friendship.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. And then the tie-ins with the Liberators and like seeing Valkyrie and Thundra, and like I loved it. I loved all of it.
Yeah, I think I saw too. They'd said, I was looking it up, some Liberators trivia, and there was a Liberator thing in it was like the 70s or something like that with Black Widow and something, and then but they said, I think it was for this, that they never actually say that it's the Liberators except on the cover of the comic or something like that. It's either in this Peter David or it was in another one, but I was like, that's interesting, because they're getting there, right? We almost, well, not almost, we basically got A-Force in the movies. We definitely got them in the comics though.
Yep.
And so She-Hulk was the leader of A-Force during Battle World, which was, man, that story, that was when Singularity was there, who's kind of similar to Love from Thor. I don't know. I feel like if we got an A-Force type thing from something like this,
I think,
oh man,
yeah,
that
it's a
would be
matter of
awesome.
time.
It really it feels like it. Yeah.
When, not if.
Kevin, what did you think about the Peter David issues?
Yeah, it was okay. It was also enjoyed the art for this one. It was a different style,
Yeah.
I like the art for this one. Yeah, it was okay. I mean, the whole bounty hunting thing, I was like, it was whatever, but it definitely, I enjoyed reading it, but I definitely preferred Byrne and Slott over Peter David. And then even looking at some more of the more recent runs, I would say I probably enjoyed David's more than some of the recent runs. But yeah, it was okay. It was just a different thing, like going through all of Slott and you're like lawyer, and then it's like a big change, and then she's like not doing that anymore. It's like, okay, it's like taking away that part of her character. But like Sarah was saying, she went on a different journey to like get back to that point of how she wanted to help people and everything like that. So
yeah, it's kind of like Superior Spider-Man in a sense, where it was like, Spider-Man's got a thing that he's doing, and then all of a sudden this big twist happens. We've got a brand new story to talk about, but then 30 issues later, it's back to the way that it was. But again, I applaud them for any time they go out of the box and try some other thing with a character. That always is cool. Brian says, but he who remains wasn't evil, nor was he Kang directly, right? Technically, he is a Kang, and he also, in a way, was kind of evil. I mean, he's made to be very benevolent, but he is cutting timelines and like ending people when maybe they shouldn't be ended. So maybe there's some secrets that he didn't tell. That'll be something we'll have to reveal. The next one, this was an interesting one. This was, I would have said, had I not reread it, my favorite of the She-Hulk runs, but isn't. And it's not that it's a bad run. It's a little bit of everything we'll talk about, but it's Charles Soule's run. Charles Soule and Javier Pulido. Love the art. The art's very quirky, but I love Javier. He did really good on, I think it was Daredevil, and he also did some Hawkeye issues as well. And it's a very sort of surreal type of art. It took me out of it a little bit, especially in the action. But when you're looking at, like, there's ones where, he'd have a 2-page spread of her office that was in the, the apartment complex with all the little things going on in different people's houses. I thought all of that stuff was really cool. And I enjoy the run. It's just that it felt very unfocused. Like there was this whole conversation about the blue folder and then everything with, I think her name was Miss Yang and Hey the monkey. And we never really find out what went on with, like, for some reason I was like, oh, I must have fallen asleep in like the last 2 issues. I can't wait to reread this and figure out what it was. And we didn't. And I was like, oh, she just kind of leaves, or no, but then she comes back but we still never know, like, is she from space? Is she an alien? But there's some cool bits in there too. Like, I loved her representing Doom's son, who just wanted to go live his own life. He did not want to become the king. And so she's like fighting against Doom in court. I thought that was really great. Sarah, any thoughts on the Charles Soule run?
No, this is one that I still need to read.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You definitely like the art. It's very, very vibrant as well. Like, the coloring is just absolutely phenomenal. Excellent. Kevin, I think you share the same opinion I've now grown.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a fan of the art. I mean, I understand what the style it is, and it's I'm gonna speak out of both sides of my mouth. It's a good style, but I don't like it. You know, it looks good,
Yeah.
but like I like especially the way he like draws She-Hulk, and I don't really like. She looks like I don't know. I didn't really like it, but like you said, it had individual parts that were pretty interesting. Like the fact I enjoyed her. She's her own practice again. You know,
Right.
so there's that part. There's obviously going up against Daredevil and representing Steve Rogers, or in that case, you know, that was pretty. That I felt is a good inspiration, at least for maybe what will be happening in the series. You know, we've only seen the teaser of the of him in the Daredevil suit. We don't know if he's actually going to be Matt Murdock and either assist her or go up against her in court. We don't know that, but hopefully he does in some sense. And then also the forming the relationship with her and Patsy Walker, Hellcat, was really nice. Yeah, that was a really good part of it. But yeah, I mean, I remember going into it, you had said, because you had previously read it, that you really liked it, and I remember as I was making my way through the comics, I was like, I like Byrne, I like Slott, you know, David's was pretty good. I got to Souls and I was like, it was okay. Like I wasn't blown away by it, you know. So I definitely wouldn't recommend, like I would recommend Slott or Byrne to somebody looking for a She-Hulk comic before I did Charles Soule's run.
Yeah, and I would almost even, like I said, I love the first 6 issues of the run, because you've got the first issue is phenomenal, and I think it even carries into the second when it's like a lady, who's suing, or she wants to just settle with Tony Stark. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever, because she's like, yeah, I know Tony Stark. I'll just go talk to him. And so she goes there and accidentally says she's there for some legal reason. And so then they shuffle her over to the legal department, which is just this old man who's really mean. And so she's like, eventually gets to Tony, and she's like, Tony, like she has all the proof. She has all the stuff. Just pay her. And so by the end of the issue, you know, she gets a ton of money and gives some of it to Jen to start up her firm, which was awesome. Like, I love that. The like you said, the Daredevil stuff was great. He even says in the one, he's like, Jen, because she's out in LA, or she goes out to LA and he's out there. And he's like, you know, we're both attorneys, but isn't it weird we've never had a case together? And I just was like, ooh, I wonder if we're going to get that in the show. But then obviously, you know, they get it later in the story. So there's some interesting ones, but then it gets into like, you know, there's like an Ant-Man issue where they get really tiny, and then they're fighting some guy who was like a secret bad guy, but wasn't. It comes out of nowhere. That's part of the blue, you know, the blue file or whatever that was. There were certain parts that just didn't stick for me, but the other things I thought were great. Like, I'll still remember that series fondly, and the covers, really good covers on that one too. Almost as good as the very brief series that is out right now. I've only got a couple issues. I've been reading it on Marvel Unlimited, so I'm 3 issues in. But She-Hulk by Rainbow Rowell, and covers by Jen Bartel. Absolutely,
So
probably
good.
some of the.
So
I mean,
good.
if Jen's doing the covers, you know that it's going to sell, and clearly it has. Even though the story itself, I haven't even gotten hooked yet on the story. Like, I'm waiting for something to happen, and now it's like Jack of Hearts showed back up. I don't know much about him, but it's like, oh, he was gone, and that was almost the whole issue for the third one. I'm like, I thought this was a She-Hulk book. Like, we're not getting a lot of She-Hulk in here. And so I'm hoping something comes from it. I'm hanging on. Obviously, it's free to read on Marvel Unlimited, so I'm going to keep checking it out. But yeah, Sarah, what have you been keeping up with it?
I read the first 2 issues, and I was like, whoa, this isn't good.
Yeah, like, it's just, I don't know what it is. It's just, it's missing something. Like, you could put any character into this story and it would be the same thing, right? Like, there's nothing She-Hulky about it.
Yeah. I like the is that the I've read so many runs recently. That's the one with Titania and Jen fighting at the beginning. Right. Okay.
Yeah, where they're like, we're gonna fight, or we're gonna like make this a regularly scheduled thing. It's like, I fight you, I want to fight you. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, you know, it's entertaining, but it's not like I'm not invested.
Yeah, it certainly isn't required reading at this point, I would say. Kevin, you're feeling the same thing?
No, I've been enjoying it, actually, because
good.
when I was reading it, so I had mentioned this to you, Alex. I've been essentially going through the Bendis era of everything, you know, like starting. Yeah. So right when this was starting to come out, I started with Avengers Disassembled, and that's where Jack of Hearts
Yeah,
he plays a role, and that's when he like leaves, and like he obviously had a relationship with Jen previously, you know. So the fact that like it took me a second to realize that, but like yeah, he's coming back, and like she's trying to help him figure out like why he's back and everything like that, and like what's been happening. So yes, I mean I caught up with them releasing in print, but I think there's only really one issue past what's on Unlimited because
they've had some delays.
They've been delayed a little bit.
There's been a lot of Marvel delays recently.
Yeah.
I've been like the last 3 solicit mags have been like the same comic.
Yeah,
and I was like, dang, I wonder. I don't know what's going on there.
So yeah, it is very Jack Hart's heavy. I don't know if either of you know this. I don't know if it's supposed to just be a mini series and it's just this one story, or if it's ongoing. So
it's supposed to be ongoing.
So at least as far as this first storyline is Jack of Hearts centered. But yeah, I mean, I've been enjoying it. Like I said, I probably 60% of the reason is for the covers, because just to have the great covers, because they're so good. But yeah, I mean, I've been enjoying it. I haven't been being like, oh, I don't like this, you know. And it's like Sarah said, the part with Titania, like I enjoyed that. It had good moments, and the interior art is also good too. I've been enjoying it too. So I mean, all around, I've been enjoying it. But obviously, yeah, like we'd have to see where it goes and lands to see if it's like whatever or whatever. But
yeah,
yeah, and Alex, I also there's a run in between the Soul and this one. I don't know if you knew about that one. That one's also not pretty.
Was that? Oh, you know, and I might have seen that on Marvel Unlimited.
It's interesting. It's
like during or after World War
Civil War II.
Right?
It's after Civil War
Civil War II, where she's it was like something about she goes out in search of something. I've not read that run.
That one's very like in the mind and everything, and that one's interesting. It's I don't know. It's split on Marvel Unlimited because it started as some sort of She-Hulk title, and then it switches to just Hulk title. So and it gets renumbered. So, but at that point, she becomes more of the Savage She-Hulk, which is how she entered Jason Aaron's Avengers run and everything. You know, so that one was different. I think you might enjoy the differentness of that. Sarah, have you read that one? I forget who wrote it, but
I keep wanting to say Fred Valente, but I
think it was a female presenting person. I think it's Tamako. I want to
Mariko Tamar.
Yeah. It was. Yeah, that was who it was.
So, that was a weird time in comics.
It is, yeah,
because She-Hulk got the crap beaten out of her by Thanos, and then Civil War happens. And then Bruce Banner gets shot in the head by Hawkeye and killed for, a year or two before he's brought back. And so there was like a bunch of, let's rehash some of these stories that we haven't seen before. So I think honestly, Jason Aaron really brought She-Hulk back more so than this series has, because he even gave her a whole, I mean, there's multiple things, because she died in, what was it? Empire. And she comes back, and then she got and I would highly recommend this. Al Ewing did a one-shot for her. That was her telling the story of all the times that she's died because of the whole Green Door thing through his Hulk run. And that was awesome. I thought it was called The Immortal She-Hulk, I think. And oh man, that was a really great one-shot. But then also, Jason Aaron did like a World War She-Hulk, basically, where she gets taken to the Red Room. And that was okay. It wasn't amazing, but like her throughout all of it was awesome. She's been really good on the Avengers, and seeing her progress from being that savage She-Hulk to now where she's like basically normal, she can turn back at will sort of thing, is really cool. So I think, hats off to him for being able to develop a character like that on an Avengers roster, which it makes me curious for some of those past runs of like, how did Sarah, have you read John Byrne's Fantastic Four?
I haven't.
I have.
You have? Is She-Hulk good in that one? Like, is she written well?
I mean, she's okay. She's mostly like, I wanted to see how much of a precursor it was to her series, that he did. And she's really like second fiddle, obviously, because she's like the new team member and whatever, and and I got through a good amount of it. And then it was just too much of a Fantastic Four book that I was just like, I like the sciencey, what's happening, so I just kind of like would flip through it and would just kind of read what she was doing. And she was like, I think Byrne started to get a handle on her, hence why he continued with her in her series, The Sensationals, after that, so, but I I wouldn't say anybody should maybe check it like actively look it out. Like I was just like, oh, I'm curious. Let me go look and see. And like so, like she's in at least 50 issues, I think, something like that, because it's right after Secret War to like the issue 300, something around there.
It's a
And then
bunch.
yeah, it's a lot. So they established some characters that come over into Sensational She-Hulk, but like other than that, it's like she's okay, but it's not like she's not like a highlight or anything like that.
I know.
So-
I remember. Or go ahead, Sarah. Sorry.
I was just going to say some of those covers though are great and
Mhm.
worth looking at.
Hey, I mean, I could scroll through comic covers all day.
I know.
You don't have to read anything. All you got to do is look at them, and they're so gorgeous. And it's funny as a fan too when you're reading them, because you're like, man, I wish the art in this book was as good as these covers a lot of times. What I was going to say is that I way back, oh man, that'd been last January. I'd read the White Vision storyline of how he become, from WandaVision, and it was in West Coast Avengers, and She-Hulk was in that, and she was awesome in that. She had the coolest outfit. It was like a beach tank top that was like blue and white, and she just had. I remember I have some screenshots on my iPad that I saved of just specifically her doing these really cool like moves and stuff. So I know she's definitely flourished in some of the outside books. I do want to call out this comment. It's not She-Hulk related, but Brian said Charles Soule wastes his time when he doesn't write Darth Vader, and that's only because he writes Vader better than anyone has. If Brian is still listening, Soule has written so much more than Vader, and so much more in general. But if you're just looking for something to read, Brian, he's got like almost 40 issues right now of Star Wars. And then he's also been doing all of these mini series around, I think her name is Kiera from Solo, about Crimson Dawn. And so he's basically gotten to develop all of the Crimson Dawn lore. And he's about to start doing some High Republic stuff too. So he's got a ton of Star Wars stuff out there for you Star Wars fans. As we wrap this up, though, Sarah, we'll start with you. If you had to recommend one run to someone who hasn't read any of these, which run would you recommend?
I mean, I'm partial to Peter David, but
that's fair.
Just because it is such an iconic run, I have to go John Byrne.
Yeah.
I've got to.
Okay. I like that. Kevin, same?
No, I'd say Slott.
Okay.
And then do Slott, and then maybe if you want, do the full Byrne, or at least just do a couple of the Byrne ones so that you can get an idea of like what he did with her and like the fourth, because essentially by Slott's run, she's not really fourth wall breaking anymore. She doesn't really do that anymore as much or at all. So yeah, I would say Slott, and then get some of the Byrne. But yeah, like Sarah, I am partial to the Byrne. Like that's the one I would, if I wanted to, I would go back and read a couple runs or like the storyline runs and such.
Yeah.
Did you notice at the end of, I think it was the Peter David run, that there was a meta cancellation of the run where it was like,
oh yes,
yeah, like the attorney shows up into that office or whatnot, and it's like his name's like Mr. Comic or Mr. Canceled or something, and they're like, yeah, we're backing out, like we're canceling it, it's done. And it was like, I liked that, but I was still like, you're so close, like I'm waiting for her to break the fourth wall again. And I feel like I would not be surprised if we see that happen in this Rainbow run, because they got to tie it into the show. Like everyone's probably going to be loving that fourth wall break, so I'd be surprised if they don't pull that off. Since you guys recommended those, I am going to recommend the Charles Soule run, but I'll say if you don't want to read it after the first 6 issues, then you can stop. But you got to check it out for Hellcat. You got to check it out for some of those cool cases with Tony Stark too. So Kevin, Sarah, thank you guys so much for coming on to talk She-Hulk. I'm really excited for where the show goes, and I hope some more people pick up these issues because, like I said, I was kind of a newcomer in reading them, and I got hooked on a lot of them. So thank you guys both so much for joining and for your recommendations.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks, Alex.
Awesome. And that's going to do us for us here at Comics and Cinema. I'm your host, Alex Klein, and we will see you guys at the movies.